الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. One of the amazing things about the heart is when it comes to the actions of the heart. It's very strange, it's amazing, it's a miraculous thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And if we understand really the essence of these actions, that a person has to do all of the actions that are supposed to be done by the heart no matter what. Meaning, and we mentioned this before, there is deeds done by the heart, like love, fear, hope, being pleased, and so on. Either a person love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this love is mahabbatul ta'zim, is the love of exaltation, not the natural love that a person would have towards his relatives and things like this. No, this is the ta'zim, this is the ibadah one, this is the one of worship. If a person doesn't do that, he would love something else. It has to be either or some of this and some of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from our hearts to be, when it comes to these a'mal, to these actions, to be only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's ibadah. So the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Because if a person doesn't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will fear something else. And if he fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that much, that means the rest of it will be the fear of other than Allah. The same thing with al-raja, hope, and so on. And one of which, since we're talking about the means, is at-tawakkul, relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So even with the asbab, whether it's physical asbab, physical means or religious means, still the heart has to rely fully upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not partially, not relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and relying upon oneself or other than Allah. Relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, without any partnership in it whatsoever. Fully relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know that this is the strongest person on the face of earth, is the one that fully rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The subject that when people say rely upon yourself, you have to have confidence in yourself, all of that is just can sound nice, but really when you look at it, rely upon yourself, what does that mean? What does it mean to rely upon yourself? You know, a person can be walking a wall, fall on his head, kills him, and what relying upon himself will do? We're so weak. We cannot push away harm or bring benefit. We're so weak and deficient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. Yes, a person has to think good about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The subject of taking the means while relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the strongest individual on the face of earth. So he would rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his heart, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. And if ma sha'Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha' lam yakun. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will for something to be, it becomes. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't will for it to happen, it would never happen. So therefore the heart is fully attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while taking the means in the most perfect way. And that's why those who deny taking the means, they have problem in their own intellect and reason. They're insane. And those who rely upon the means, this is shirk in the tawheed of Allah. You don't rely upon the means. You rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the means. So you have to take the means. And if you don't take the means, you are accusing the religion of being not sufficient. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to make salah, to read Quran, to be kind to others. Whatever in the deen of Islam, these are means. Whoever deny that there are means, they're basically turning away from the deen of Allah. Whoever think that the means are not really important, so there's something wrong with their minds. Whoever rely upon them, this is a matter of shirk in the tawheed. So we're only left with one thing and one thing only. And that is to rely fully upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while taking physically the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted. And this is how a person reaches the highest level of matters of al-Iman. Whether it's in matters of ibadah, matters of livelihood things, everything, relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And once a person rely upon Allah because he believes in the qadr of Allah, he's already prepared, set himself to be always pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always pleased. There's no conditions when it comes to his being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and as Sheikh Salim Tamir rahimahullah, he said that يكتنف المقدور التوكل على الله قبله والرضا بعده. المقدور is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. There is something before it and something after it. Before it happens, before anything happens, a person making tawakkul upon Allah. We don't know the ghaib, we don't know the unseen. So he's relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking the permissible means fully and diligently doing it. Then the maqdur, then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed happened. Already right attached to it afterwards is ar-rida, to be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one that would wait till things happen and then he think he will be pleased, then it's too late. He has to, what you call when someone yuwattin nafsa, someone has to be upon it before it happens. That means while he's taking the means, if you're, say for example, something as studying for an exam, you're taking the means and you're studying, but in your heart, you're relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're taking the means. And you already had set yourself that whatever the result and the outcome is, you're pleased with it. Not a statement from someone lazy that doesn't do his work and he says, I'm going to be pleased with the result. Of course, you have to be pleased anyway. But it's someone that is relying upon Allah and taking the means. But he's already said that he's going to be pleased with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for him. It has to be before. You understand? Al-azm ala rida, to have the determination that you will be pleased, has to happen before things happens. Don't wait for things to happen and then you try to have some rida and you try to ask some people or read some verses of the Quran or do something so that you feel pleased with the qadr of Allah. Right? This is also good, but it's too late. You have to do this, or you have to have the determination before things happens. So that means what? That means a person is always pleased. What does it mean before things happen? Now a person is pleased with Allah. Tomorrow is pleased with Allah. At all times he's pleased with Allah. Because the one that decree matters is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, the most wise, subhanahu wa ta'ala, while taking the means as we heard. So these two things has to be always there. Tawakkul ala Allah wa rida. And to be always pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings happiness in this life, brings the success in this life and in the hereafter, and then puts the subject of the means all together in a perfect way according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we have in the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ the perfect example and the ways of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and it's preserved for a reason. All of that is preserved for us to learn it, so that we're not just talking in theory, but rather we see it practically happening. The word sounds nice, but how was the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in their affairs, and how they were having this patience and being pleased with Allah while taking the means and the tawakkul ala Allah in all of their affairs. And this is, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us learn from that and to keep our hearts always attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. And inshallah, the tafsir inshallah will be in a few minutes. I know everybody is tired, but inshallah, to sunrise only inshallah. May Allah make it easy inshallah.